laughed when my husband went to bed and told our daughter. He got really angry about it and tried to hurt himself. Now I'm pregnant with twins and my marriage is ruined. I was 28F. Woken up this morning because the sheets I was lying on were wet. I assumed our child 6F had had an accident, but when I checked where the wetness came from, it to my surprise turned out it wasn't her, but my husband that had wet the bed. After I had taken a shower, I woke him up and told him he'd wet the bed. At first he denied it, then I guess he realized he indeed had. As he got this mortified look on his face, jumped right out of bed and started to try rip the bedding off. As we have pull-on sheets, and our child was sleeping on the other side. He didn't get them off. It looked stupid and honestly quite funny. So I chuckled. He angrily told me it wasn't funny. So I stopped at that point. The only thing his pulling of the sheets had accomplished was to wake up our child, who was confused and asked what was going on. He didn't say shit, just idiotically continued to try get the sheets off. So, when he didn't reply, I just told her he'd wet the bed. At that, he just froze and looked at me with this weird look on his face, almost like he was about to cry or something. Our child asked why he'd wet the bed, and as he still was completely silent, I went something along the line of that sometimes accidents happens. He just stood there staring at me. If looks could kill, I would be dead, and I'm not exaggerating when I say he looked at me with pure hate. I've never been afraid of him, but for a second or two I thought he might hit me. Then he just dropped the things he'd managed to get off the bed on the floor, left the room and locked himself in the bathroom for about 45 minutes. When he came out, he got dressed in a hurry and just left with saying, "You can take her to school." He didn't even look at me. His behavior really annoyed me, but I just let him be, as I didn't want to argue with him when he was in such a bad mood. When I got home from work, he was still sulking and basically ignored me. I was still annoyed with him from the morning, so his behavior annoyed me even more. So I told him to get over it, that it wasn't the end of the world that he wet the bed, and to stop taking it out on me. At that, he accused me of having humiliated him when I told our child. I found that utterly ridiculous on so many levels, so I angrily told him that he humiliated himself when he fucking with the bed. Not me. He didn't take that too well and said, "Fuck you," and went off to his computer, and now he refuses to talk to me and I just feel confused. I think he's the one that behaved poorly and immature, and that I haven't done anything wrong. The last thing I said may have been harsh, but I feel like he had it coming. Yet I feel like perhaps I was mean to him. I'd edit. I just want to clarify that I did not tell our child to be mean or to humiliate my husband. I told her because I didn't know what else to say, and as it was quite obvious what had happened, I thought it was just best to be honest. I didn't tell her in any humiliating way. Just as a matter of fact, without doing a big thing about it. I didn't think my husband would feel that bad about it. Update 1. Thanks to everyone that made me see the situation from my husband's side and made me realize I'm in awe. Or worse, I reread my original post, and there are some things I would like to elaborate on. Before I come to the update, I did feel empathy and I did care about my husband. I was gentle when I told him after I woken him up. However, his reaction caught me off guard, and the time from when he got up from bed until he locked himself in the bathroom couldn't have been more than a minute. After that, I felt it was best to leave him alone. I know I was an awe for telling our child, but I didn't do it to be mean or humiliate him. It was a stupid, wrongful decision. I regret it further. It's not easy to show someone that you care when you're being ignored. I did text him after he left and asked if he was okay, but he left it on read. I asked him again when I got home, but he didn't answer. I asked him if we could talk about it. No answer. I asked him if he could at least tell me why he was so mad at me. No answer. I gave up and went to make dinner. After dinner, I asked him if he could stop ignoring me. No answer. I asked him if he wanted me to leave, to which he replies, "You can stay. I don't care." So I asked him again if he will stop ignoring me if I stay, and when he says no is when I had it. And while I don't think ignoring someone like that is okay, I know I handled it really bad, and I do feel awful for being outright mean to him anyway. I texted him early this morning to say that I was so sorry and asked if he was willing to talk after work so that I could apologize. He texted me back an okay. Around noon, we met up at home and he understandably was cold to me when we met. Didn't say much. I apologized for everything. For laughing, for telling our child, for telling him to get over it, and for the part that I'm most ashamed of, that I told him he humiliated himself. He was just silent the whole time, and when I was done, he just asked why I told our child. I explained, and after that, we just sat in silence in what felt like forever. Then, right out of nowhere, he went something like, "I scared you, right?" And I told him that briefly. He did. He said he could feel that. I asked what made him react so strong, but he didn't know. Just said that he panicked when he realized he'd wet the bed, that it got even worse when I told our child, and that he just got so fucking angry with me for it. I apologized again for making him feel that way. He apologized for making me scared. I'm not going to go through all that we said after that. It was a long talk, but in conclusion, none of us is happy with how we acted, and we have both apologized for it. He wasn't that bugged about me laughing, but we both agreed that I shouldn't have told our child. However, he's no longer mad about it and doesn't think it's that big of a deal. We both think he shouldn't have ignored me like that, and that I handled it poorly and was mean. We have both accepted each other's apologies, but I still feel bad for being so mean to him. But all in all, we are on good terms now. Edit to add, I realize I really messed up in this situation, and was completely oblivious to it at the time. Normally I don't struggle with empathizing with others, but in this case I clearly did. I wasn't expecting such a strong reaction from my husband, which completely caught me off guard. We've been together for 9 years, and I usually have a good sense of what upsets him and what doesn't. But I got it all wrong this time. I'm not proud of how things turned out. As for our daughter, I've spoken to her. She noticed that something was off, especially when her dad left suddenly. We had a conversation about it the next morning, and again when I put her to bed, trying to explain things without overwhelming her. I don't know if my husband has talked to her yet. He slept in her room last night, but she was already asleep by the time he went to bed. So I'm not sure how much they've interacted. He hasn't ignored her or been rude, but she can probably sense that he's in a bad mood and has been keeping her distance. For now she's staying at my parents' house, so we can talk things through without her being in the middle of it. I feel terrible that she's been caught up in all of this. New update to begin with. As there was some concerns as to why my husband went to bed. Since he was sober, I did try to get him to see a doctor, after so many of you suggested he should. But he outright refused and claimed it was pointless, as they wouldn't do anything anyway. He's wet the bed one other time that I know of, and both times he was rather exhausted and stressed out, so that may have been the reason. I don't know, this is too long. So a heads up to anyone who just wants to read about my husband divorcing me, you can stop reading now. My second post was written just after I had apologized. Based on the initial response on my first post, I concluded that I must be an awful person and I felt so bad for him. But to be honest, I never felt that my initial actions were that bad, and I still don't. I'm not saying I didn't deserve any of the hate I got. I surely did, but some of it was just vile. And some of the things I got hated for never happened, but in the minds of commenters. But since outcome of my actions was so horrible and I never intended to hurt him, I felt truly bad I had. So the apology was sincere, and at the time of the second post, I was happy. We were on speaking terms and hoped we could put this behind us. It turned out I couldn't. Shortly after, I realized I was still bothered by his behavior. I also started to receive more comments from people who saw issues with his behavior as well, which I'm grateful for, as it reassured me that it was problematic. What I admitted on purpose from my first post, as I wanted unbiased opinions, is that my husband can be a bit unstable at times. Like he can be very immature and sensitive, has issues controlling his emotions, anger, and he's so damned hard to get. Sometimes it's likely due to mental health issues. So it isn't fair to him, and I'm awful for it. But sometimes I just find him so annoying and exhausting. I guess I got called out on that in my first post. At the time, he'd been in contact with a mental health team for years. But if it wasn't for them prescribing his medications, he would have cut contact with him a long time ago anyway. I was already a bit tired of always having to cater to his moods, and I'm not doing enough to address his issues. So his weird, over-the-top and threatening reaction, in my opinion, to wetting the bed and me telling our child just felt too much, even though he was hurt. And as I wrote, I had never felt threatened by him before, so it did bother me even though he didn't actually do anything. I made some attempts to try to talk with him again about what happened, especially why he got so angry that I felt threatened by it. I even asked him if it had something to do with him wetting the bed growing up, based on some theories about him being shamed for it in the comments, but he just said it didn't, and it was clear he didn't want to talk about any of it, and I didn't want to push. He's so bloody hard to talk with when it comes to stuff like his emotions or relationship issues, which can be very frustrating for me. To be honest, I even have some thoughts about whether I wanted to stay in this marriage, but they weren't that serious. Then about a week before Christmas, he unexpectedly made a suicide attempt. Sadly not his first. I did not see it coming, and I still feel like shit for it. Probably always will. His memory the hours before is blurry. But he's adamant he didn't intend to hurt himself when he left our home that night. But I should have known anyway. It was bad, and for a while, we didn't know if he was going to make it, or what condition he would be in if he did. Thankfully, he survived and did so basically without any long-term effects. The time after was horrible, and when he got to come home, he was so unwell he was basically lethargic for weeks. As to why he did it, the short answer is that he apparently had a hellish amount of anxiety. He wanted to go away, which mixed bad with his sometimes complete lack of impulse control. He's been very clear that it had nothing to do with anything I've done. I didn't know how bad he was feeling, because he didn't tell me, or anyone else. And it's so damn hard to help him when he doesn't tell us how he's feeling. It scared the shit out of me, and it scared the shit out of him too. To the point where he finally realized he needed more help. And he's been serious about it in a way he's never been before. So, when he was offered therapy, he accepted. Now the waiting time is a joke. So he will be starting in October. In the meantime, he's been seeing a nurse and a psychiatrist. By April, he was pretty much back to normal and went back to work. In the beginning of May, we found out I was pregnant. It was definitely not planned and was a result of us fucking up when it came to birth control. Despite of all the obvious reasons why we should have terminated the pregnancy, we decided to go through with it anyway. It wasn't a decision we took lightly, but it was what we wanted. Here I can add that he was a fucking mess during my first pregnancy, and the second apart from our 6-year-old. We have a 4-year-old as well. Was hard for him too, but for some reason that escapes me now. We thought it would be different this time. And it was for a while. At 12 weeks we found out it wasn't one baby. But to babies I know it's awful. But I would lie if I said we were happy about it initially. But by then, we were already set on having a baby. So, we both wanted to go along with it, and after having digested the news, we became kind of excited about it. I'm 23 weeks pregnant now. And up until yesterday things have overall been quite good. When he got home from work, he was in a crappy mood. I thought he had a bad day at work. But when I asked him about it, I was served with an angry rant of how stupid we are for having the babies and that we should have aborted them, like WTF. And when I asked why he was saying it, and pointed out it wasn't a nice thing to say, he just replied, well, you asked and it's what I feel. I didn't want to talk with him when he was like that. So I told him we'd talk about it later when the kids were asleep. I asked him what that was all about and where it came from. He said he didn't know. In the way he says it when he doesn't want to talk about something, I tried to push a little but got nowhere. So I got a bit frustrated and told him that it wasn't fair to me to say things like that. And then refused to talk about it. He was just silent for a while. Then said fuck this and went and locked himself in the bathroom. When he came out he looked sad. So I asked him if he was okay and he said he needed some air. I was like okay and added something like it's okay to be sad. You know he didn't like that. So he very angrily told me he wasn't sad. I know I should have let him be, but I just got such a bad feeling. So I asked him to stay. He didn't like that either. So he screamed at me that he didn't want to fucking stay and slammed the door so hard it woke the kids up when he left. I couldn't do much else than tend to the children, pretend everything was fine and hope he would return safe and sound. I was so damned worried. So when the kids were back to sleep, I texted him to ask if he was okay and then I cried. He replied almost instantly, I'm okay, home in 5, sorry. Love you, which eased my worrying. But I was still sad and angry. He came back shortly after. He was clearly high so he had calmed down. He isn't addicted. When he saw I was crying, he said he was sorry. I told him I'm not okay with him treating me like that, yada yada yada. He said he knew and apologized again. We've had that conversation before. I realized I wasn't even angry with him anymore. Perhaps I should have been. I just asked him to please not run away like that again. And he promised he wouldn't. But he probably will. Then he was tired. So, we went to bed, but I couldn't sleep. I haven't been feeling the great today. To be honest, I'm scared. Disappointed, and I feel fucking stupid. My husband was in a better mood when he came home today. And he's been such a sweetheart. He even talked to me. He apologized for yesterday. And told me he was disappointed in himself for how he behaved. That he's been trying so hard to behave like a normal person. His words, and that he was tired of failing all the fucking time. I know he's trying and he isn't failing all the time. So I told him to not be so hard on himself. I asked him about how he was feeling, and he admitted he wasn't feeling that well, but couldn't elaborate. So I asked him how bad not that well was and said it wasn't too bad and that I didn't need to worry and promised to tell me if it got worse. But I don't know if I can trust him on that. I'm so fucking scared he will crash again. I'm not sure I have the energy for it. Not now, and I'm pretty sure he doesn't have it either. I'm hoping so much that therapy will help him. But I'm not sure what realistically can be expected from it. What if it doesn't make a difference? What do we do then? I know it probably doesn't seem like it, as my posts have only focused on the negative, but I love my husband so much and I don't want to live without him. But I don't want to live like this either. I don't know, perhaps I'm just overly sensitive right now, being pregnant and all. Edit to add. It's overwhelming to see my situation laid out so clearly, and I'm still trying to process how bad it truly sounds. Yes, we are about to have 2 newborns. and we already have 2 children under the age of 7, which in itself is an incredible challenge. But when you add in my husband's ongoing mental health struggles, it becomes even more daunting. Honestly, I've had a hard time accepting that this is my life now. On the positive side, we both have supportive families nearby. Both sets of parents, along with our siblings and friends, are within close reach, which has been a saving grace. I have a good relationship with my parents, and they are aware that my husband has been struggling with his mental health for some time now. However, I don't feel entirely comfortable talking to them about everything that's going on. There are some things I feel I need to keep to myself for now. His parents are wonderful people and were an immense help when things were at their worst. But like everything else in our situation, it's complicated. I don't believe that my husband would ever become a threat to me, but I have to admit that I'm not as sure as I used to be. That uncertainty is unsettling. I do know that he would never intentionally harm the kids. He loves them and is a surprisingly patient father, considering his own struggles. Still, I'm more on edge than I ever have been before. If it ever came down to it, I know that I could always go to my parents' home with the kids. Their door is always open to us, and that gives me some peace of mind even in such a turbulent time. One thing I've realized lately is that I probably need therapy myself. I've been thinking about this more and more because I'm not comfortable talking about everything with my friends and family. There are just some things that I can't seem to put into words when I'm with them, and I need someone professional to help me sort through all of this. I know I can't carry this burden on my own, and I can't be the only one trying to keep everything together. As for my husband's mental health, the situation is tough. He isn't diagnosed with bipolar disorder, though I see a lot of similar traits in his behavior. Instead, he's officially diagnosed with IIP/BPD, which is a sore subject for him as he believes it's a misdiagnosis, and ADHD either way. It's clear that he's been struggling, and the kids, despite his best efforts, are affected by it. He tries to keep his mood swings in check when they're around, but it's impossible to fully shield them from the effects of his instability. They're still young, but I can see how it impacts them, especially when he's going through one of his darker phases. I feel terrible for them. They don't deserve to be caught in the middle of this. He's a good dad in many ways, and I know he never intends to hurt them. But even so, they are indirectly affected by his behavior, whether he means for that to happen or not. For years now, I've been trying to get him to realize that he needs therapy too, not just for himself, but for the sake of our family. He's tried therapy a few times, but it never lasts. He goes for one session and then doesn't return. He's promised that he will give it another shot in October, and this time he seems serious about it. I want to believe him, I really do. But I've been through this cycle before, and I know that things often don't change as easily as I wish they would. Couples therapy is something I've been open to as well, but I don't think he's ready for it yet. We tried it once, but it didn't go well at all. He was silent for almost the entire session, apart from a few I don't know responses after that. He didn't want to go back, and honestly, I didn't see much point in forcing him. Therapy, like everything else, only works if both people are committed to it. His angry outbursts are one of the hardest things for me to deal with. When he goes on his rants, it's like he becomes someone else entirely. He can be so nasty, and it's off-putting to say the least. For example, he once called me and our child fucking stupid cunts in a fit of rage. And in those moments, it's impossible to feel any sympathy for him. I know that there are deeper issues at play, and I've tried to understand him, but it's difficult when he says such hurtful things. Everything you've written above is true, and I'm coming to terms with my own stupidity in this situation. There are factors that have made this more complicated, like the fact that we didn't know we were having twins when we decided to continue with the pregnancy. But in the end, that doesn't change much. I made the decision to keep the babies, when looking back I probably shouldn't have. It feels like a mistake now, even though at the time it didn't. I want to be clear that my husband wanted the baby when we thought it was just one. Even when we found out it was two, he still wanted to move forward with the pregnancy. I would never have gone through with it if he didn't want it to. So this isn't a case of me forcing him into a situation he didn't want, but somehow it feels like it now. I can't help but think I should have known better, that I should have seen that this would be too hard for him, even if he didn't realize it himself at the time.